There we go. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I saw a few people came in, join us as we were chatting. Hi, Wendy. Oh, sorry, it auto-corrected and misspelled your name. And hi, is it Jamie? Let me know if I'm pronouncing that right. And I saw Kimmy came in and Paula's here. And of course, Kelly's here. We were just chatting. I am so excited about our topic today because I think it is something that everyone is dealing with on like multiple levels, talking about content overwhelm. And I mean, overwhelm in general, because like Kelly and I were just talking about, there are so many things that we have to do as business owners at any given time, from, the actual deliverables for our clients, for our offers, the marketing, the content, the funnels, the tech, all the things. And so it makes sense that when it comes down to actually creating a program, creating an offer, we're like, I don't want to feel overwhelmed anymore. And yet here I am, just with, there's so much content, there's so many things to do. And then of course we have the flip side of the coin of the experience of being a learner in programs where we have been overwhelmed, where we've been fire hosed with content, and knowing that as service providers, as leaders, we don't want to replicate that experience for our people. So what we're going to be talking about today, I'm going to be leading you through kind of how I think about navigating overwhelm, some tips and tricks for making sure that we don't feel overwhelmed during the course creation process. And the best part is all of these tips and things, they make it so that your people don't feel overwhelmed as they're going through your program. Because truly that is one of the biggest killers of a good learning experience. If someone feels confused, if they feel overwhelmed, if they're like, what's going on? I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. They're going to exit. They're not going to take action, and they're not going to get the amazing results that we know is possible for them as part of the program. So what I will invite you to do, for those of you who this may be your first course cafe, you haven't come to one of these before, they are pretty much like you get to come as you are, show up as you want. You can have your camera on or off. You can ask questions in the chat. If I'm explaining a concept and you want me to like go deeper into it in the moment, you can use the raise hand feature or turn your camera on and kind of like wave at me and be like, wait, ask me more. Or if you're like, I'm feeling a bit introverted today, I just want to keep my camera off, you're welcome to ask questions in the chat. And as we go, I'll have kind of blocks along the way for questions, and there'll also be open Q&A near the end of our time together. These calls usually go for about an hour. And even though we're talking about content overwhelm today, any and all questions around course creation, systems in your business, launching, all of the things, this is your time. I am an open book. I am happy to answer anything that's coming up for you. So as we get started here, I would love to invite you, if you would like, to share in the chat kind of a bit about where you are in your course creation journey, what sort of offer you're hoping to create, who you're serving, and how things are going for you. You can just kind of let me know, because it helps me make sure that my examples are really tailored to whoever is on this call. And of course, for those of you who are watching the replay, catching the recording, if you have follow-up questions, feel free to hit reply back to the email where this replay is sent out, and I will either respond to your questions in the email or I'll respond to them on the next Course Cafe in a recording. Okay, so let's dive in. Let's talk about content overwhelm. So I would love to know if there's a specific piece that feels the most overwhelming for you. You can pop it in the comments. I really think what happens here is that the bulk of the industry leaders in the online space that are talking about how to create scalable offers, whether it's a group program, a course, a membership, a workshop, most of them are marketers. And they're coming at it from a marketing lens, from a psychology lens of how do we get someone to buy. They're not really coming at it from the lens of a learning designer, which is like what I am, where we are thinking about how do we architect the experience to be transformational? How do we make sure that people get results in our program? And this is where the kind of like bro marketer lens, because there is ethical marketing, there is ick-free marketing, there are ways that we can market our offers that we don't have to kind of do icky things. But the kind of like gross way the marketers are talking about it is more value equals more content. More. Have longer videos, have more workbooks, put more content in there. There's a reason why we see these things being called info products, because they're talking about it as the selling of information. Let's see. Hi, Anne. Welcome. So nice to have you here. And I have a huge problem with this. You will never hear me talk about scalable offers as an info product, because at the end of the day, Transformation does not come from information. Transformation comes from how we implement what we have learned. It's not about having the knowledge, because we can have the knowledge till the cows come home. But if we don't do anything with it, if we're not turning that into a change in how we think, a change in how we act, a direct action or implementation, then there's going to be no transformation in our life. So we can shower our people with information. We can give them everything we know. But if they don't take that and turn it into action, if they don't implement that somehow, then there's truly no point. And so this is where I often see the overwhelm start, is because all of these marketers are like, oh, if you want to charge a good amount of money for your course, put more in, put more bonuses, have more slides, have longer videos. We see this on sales pages all the time. It's like, do you want this course that has 5 million hours of video? We've even turned it into a podcast and it has 60 hours of audio. You can take this workbook and it has 5,000 pages. And it sounds great because you're like, ooh, and it's only $97 and I get all of this stuff. And then you open it up and you're like, but I don't want to watch a video that's long. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this workbook. And so when we sit down to create our courses, we go, hey, I want to create a course. I'm an expert in my field. What is everything I know on this topic? And we'll see this as sometimes people are like, put it all out on Post-it notes, dump it all out in a doc, write it all out in your notebook. And we write down all the things we know. We write down topics, we write down themes, we write down kind of all of these different pieces of information. And then we go, well, like, how am I supposed to teach all this? I've been doing this for years. Like, where do I start? How do I organize it? And so this is where the first shift that I want you to make is truly thinking about, it's not about content, it's about action. And if you only take one thing away from this course cafe today, I want it to be this shift. I want it to be thinking about in anything you do, whether it's content that you write, the emails that you send, the workshops that you lead, the courses that you teach. I want you to be thinking, what do my people need to do? What do they need to do? What action do they need to take? Because this is truly going to like change the game for you. And if you already have a course and you're thinking like, I think I put too much content in it and I don't think I was action focused, here's a really quick fix that you can do. You can just go through each of your videos and in text underneath the video in each lesson, write the action step. Take 5 minutes, make a list. Go reorganize your closet. Go write a draft of this email, whatever it is, as specific as possible is a quick fix. And then, we can always fix the full course later. But for those of you who are starting from scratch, when we start with action, it's going to be a very, very big shift. So let me walk you through kind of the steps that I go through in all of my programs, in my group coaching program with my clients. These are the steps I go through when I'm mapping out a learning experience to make sure that we don't get overwhelmed with content and to make sure that we're not overwhelming the learner. So for those of you who kind of snuck in as I was talking, you are invited to share in the comments a bit about where you are in your course creation journey. You can say like, hey, I'm working on a signature coaching program. There's going to be group elements. It's to help people heal from breakups. You can tell me a bit about who you serve, the topic, whatever it may be. And of course, if you have questions as I'm talking, you are more than welcome to pop those into the chat as well, or raise your hand as we go along. Excuse me. Okay. So the very first thing that I do with everyone, regardless of whether you have a program and we're revamping it or we're starting from scratch, whether it is a webinar, an offer ecosystem, a group coaching program, whatever it may be, I always start with mapping out the learning journey. And journey mapping is so key. It is so important because this allows us to get a very clear sense of where our person is starting and where we need to take them to. And there'll be a lot of times we'll hear, especially in that marketing lens again, think about the transformation, think about the transformation. How is your person transformed? What is the before and after? But I want you to think about your learning experience, like giving your people directions. Now, how helpful are directions if you only know the city that your person is in? Like, I want you to think about like, we're in Paris together and we're hanging out and it's like, okay, it's time. Like, let's go find the Eiffel Tower. And I'm just like, oh yeah, it's like on the Seine and you can like get off at this metro stop and away you go. Where's our person starting? Knowing the difference between, okay, are they in Paris? Are they in Canada with me and haven't booked a plane ticket yet? Are they 3 steps away from it? Have they ever spoken French before? Do they even know the layout of Paris? We want to think about truly how specific can we get? Because often we kind of have a general sense of where our people are. And I find we default to assuming they're absolute beginners in our subject area. So for example, I'll use myself with the people that I'm serving, helping you map out a learning experience, architect it, go from, I have an idea, let me map it out, let me build it, let me launch it, all that good stuff. There's a big difference from me starting with someone who's maybe been a service provider, they really know their material, they've been leading their clients through this transformation, they know it inside and out, but they've never created an online scalable program, versus someone who is brand new into the online space. Maybe they've never even led it as a service. They've never really thought about it. Maybe they're like, oh, I've been teaching my friends kind of informally, but when you say a funnel or you say a launch, I don't even know what those words are. So we want to really, truly think about who is our person. Now, this is really, really helpful if you have a specific person in mind, whether it's a client you've worked with or a friend, or it's yourself a few years ago, getting really clear on where are they right now? How are they thinking? Do they have any mindset blocks? Do they have any limiting beliefs? Do they have any self-doubt or imposter syndrome? Because all of these things are going to impact their level of overwhelm as they go through the experience. What skills do they already have? If I'm in for instance, in the incubator, one part of it is helping people write their emails or write their content for launching. Have they ever written an email before? And is that a skill they already have, or do we need to go right back to basics? What knowledge or awareness do they already have? If you're using terminology, if you're using jargon, if you're saying, okay, let's create a group program, and people go, wait, what's a group program? It's gonna be a big difference. So getting really clear on where is your person right now? And then where do you want to take them at the end of your learning experience? So thinking about how are they thinking? How are they feeling? What are they doing differently that they weren't doing before? What has changed in their life, their health, their relationships, their finances, their business, their sense of ease, their calendar? And of course, all of these things are going to be different depending on your area of focus and what you're teaching. But we want to start by getting these bookends of our experience, because first of all, when we really tune into it and we start doing this, often we find the transformation is massive. And we start to go, can I do all this in one program? And sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes we need to even break it up smaller and go, this is going to be a mini course. This is going to be group coaching. This is going to be something else. And other times we go, actually, yeah, like that feels good. That feels really good. Like I can lead people through that transformation. And so this is very like an intuitive process. I think we'll usually get kind of that gut reaction. And of course, in a few minutes, we'll have a little Q&A. And if you're not sure, like, well, does this feel like too big of a transformation? We can very much talk about this. But if you haven't taken the time to really tune into where is your person now and where are you taking them as part of this learning experience, the overwhelm is going to be unreal, because we're going, okay, what's absolutely everything in my brain? What's everything I know about course creation? So for instance, for myself, I've been doing learning design for at least 11 years now. I started in the corporate space, and then I've been running my own business for just over 4 years now. And so I know a lot. I have seen pretty much every type of scalable program out there in all different formats, in all different ways of teaching. And if I taught absolutely everything I know, no one would get anything done, because it would be like, there's too many options, there's too many things. Like, what are we talking about? Like, I'm not going to dump a whole bunch of neuropsychology on you, because that's not helpful. So similar for your niche, we want to think about, like, what's this transformation that we're taking people on, and start by getting clear on these bookends, because then we can be very intentional about what is going into that journey. So before I go into the next step, I want to check in. I want to hear if any questions are coming up. Is there anything that you want to share? See here, Kelly's working on a hybrid course and program, includes some live components. Kimmy is working on brain dumping, outlining, organizing everything, making it into a course. I love that. So what questions do you have for me about journey mapping and getting clear on the transformation of your program?
Is it okay to just unmute and ask the question?
Oh, of
On my,
course. Yes, yes.
okay. So I am an educator by degree,
Mhm.
and I then taught in the ed tech department at Ohio State. And so what I do now for my business is I teach students how to study smarter so they
Mhm.
can learn faster and remember longer.
Love it.
So some things you can pull out because they also obviously have to have productivity and time management so that they actually implement effective study sessions. However, uh, I could, I'm used to being forced, I should say forced because they don't need it all, to teach them all the science and give tests and all that jazz.
Mm,
So, but they don't need all that. They need to know the least amount so that they understand why it's important so they can take action and do it right. So sometimes I feel a little bit of when I get private clients and I have testimonials both as a from teaching at Ohio State and with private clients. So that's not the problem. But sometimes I guess I'm just not a marketer. That's the problem that I have more than delivering content. I really don't have any trouble delivering content. And I really feel that the part that you said, it's all about understanding how to implement it. I like to break things down to very simple, step by step, things they can check off and very sequential. And then they map that out action in their planner so that they can check it off when
mm,
it's done and they don't get overwhelmed. It's not like, oh, you need to study for 2 hours straight or something horrific like that. It's not even
mhm,
effective. But what I kind of struggle with is explaining it as well, the transformation, because each student's a little different. So basically, students generally need a combination of two things: time and task management, which
mhm,
that would be focus and productivity, kind of like falls under that umbrella. And then, of course, the science of how you learn and applying it. So sometimes I think on my sales page and things too, I kind of struggle with, am I focusing enough on the transformation or the features? And then I feel like, I don't know. But when I get on one-on-one sales calls, I do extremely well closing private clients, but I'd kind of like to do a hybrid group sessions with individual implementation sessions because I repeat myself a lot, like
mhm,
because they need some
mhm.
of the same things. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
kind of struggling with on course design. I'm looking to, most of my sales are one-on-ones, but I'd like to do a combo instead.
Oh, I love that. I love that's so key. And I mean, I think it'd be really interesting for you to go back through this replay and grab your questions because I think you just had like 4 pieces of content, even just in how you were talking, like how you're like, well, they need a combo of this and this, and like this is how I think about it, and like this is why I do this instead of this. Like all of
Mm-hmm.
those pieces are like so powerful. And I think what I found really helped me is like when we think about like, oh, like I don't like marketing or I don't feel like a marketer, it's because we kind of have this association of what that has to be. Like we almost picture like a little bit like infomercially, like, and for 3 payments of $9.99, you need this and you
Right.
need that. And when we realized, like, for me, a big shift was like, how do I like to buy? Like, what sort of content do I read? Like, what sort of people do I
Mm-hmm.
connect with? And realizing that, like, it's never going to be one piece of content in a vacuum that does everything. And the more that you're sharing, like I love how you said, like, you used to have to do this and like that's gross and it doesn't actually help, like this is why I do it this way, or like it's a
Mm-hmm.
balance of both, but like everyone's different, so this is the framework for how I think about things. I think all of those pieces are really, really important, and they can help people with the like, when you're thinking about moving into that group program, like, okay, here's my methodology. Here's, it's proven because I'm doing it in the one-to-one, and you still get
Mm-hmm.
some one-to-one support, but like these are the patterns I'm seeing and why. And like you have such a confidence when you speak that I think that will really come through the more that you give yourself permission to just like kind of say it like it is. And it doesn't have to have like sales stuff on top of it. It's just like, this is how I think about it. And if you resonate with that, you're invited to come join me.
Yeah, I do like that. And I do feel that the group setting is proven from my testimonials from my students at Ohio State because they only got group setting unless some of them, of course, occasionally would come to office hours,
Mm-hmm,
some more than others. But when you teach somewhere for 12 years, the percentage that actually come to office hours is really quite small,
mm-hmm,
you know.
mm-hmm,
So I feel like they're both proven because of
mm-hmm.
that. And
Yeah.
then how much better is it when, I guess I'm thinking it's also financially affordable, which I know some people will say, well, people that can afford it will afford it, but maybe just being a first gen, it's like, great. So if they want all privates, they can have them. Like that's not a
Yeah.
problem.
Mhm.
But I also feel like if you have some group setting, they can always come live, which I feel is important. Students are done with
Mhm.
you, like after COVID, they're just not into, let me watch a
Mhm.
recording of any length,
Yeah.
more than
Yeah.
a few minutes. So I just feel like
Mhm.
it's, here's live. If you have a conflict, it'll always be recorded. And
Mhm.
then, and then I'm going to have, then they can book, so many private sessions is what I was thinking.
Mhm.
And it's kind of a nice balance for me as well, because I like both. I love teaching a group and I like one-on-one. So it's like a win-win, but
Mhm.
they get that. The key there though, the number one thing that I think all of us struggle with is we hear these great ideas, but then we get off a call, we get off a workshop, we get off whatever, and then we look at our stuff. We're
Mhm.
like, well, how does that work for my junk? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do I
Yeah.
do it? And so
Mhm.
just giving them a little bit of a boost by me looking at their notes and say, well, how are you going to turn that into a powerful study tool for your
Mhm.
notes?
Mhm.
What examples did we share in group that kind of relate to this? And they just kind of, they really incredibly benefit from having a little guidance that just makes
Yeah.
them feel like they're just, oh, now I know how to take off. So
Mhm.
I just think that's the reason for me to wanting to change the format the most.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of like a hybrid like group with like, maybe some self-study, but some stuff taught live and then some one-to-one components. Like that was really the driver for me for creating the Incubator, which is my group coaching program, because it's the same thing. If people want to work with me one-to-one, like absolutely, let's work together one-to-one. If you want to just do self-study, I've got the self-study courses. And for the Incubator, it was like, hey, great, we've got these weekly calls
Mm-hmm.
so I can answer your questions. We can dive into your specific situations. You can get some accountability. And also you can get these one-to-one milestones with me. So it's like I still have my hands into what everyone's working on. Cause like you said, it's like the
Right.
one-to-one's fun. And I think that's the biggest thing is like we want to have fun. We want to really love our programs. And you can clearly articulate why you're doing things each way, which I think is another powerful thing. Sometimes I know we can shy away from wanting to do like scalable programs or something because we can feel like it's almost like we're taking something away from people. Like, oh, this isn't as good as my one-to-one. This isn't as good as if you had my whole brain. Instead of being like, oh no, in some ways this is
Yeah,
better.
I completely agree because I was on a call and she totally called me out. I like things done well. You might say perfectionist. I
Mhm.
like to say things done well, but and so I just kind of laughed and she was like, why haven't you got this done? I'm like, I don't know, like, and and I think what I just said to you, like, I'm adjusting what I'm offering. So I'm like, why haven't you sent out your emails? I'm like, well, and I still feel like there's still a learning curve teaching online. Like I've covered it,
Mhm.
figured it out one-on-one, what I do differently to make them amazing.
Mhm.
But I still miss like being able to walk around the room and give comments when they're like setting their goals. And I guess they're just going to have to submit them. So I just still like that one-on-one, like check-in and things. So I guess that's just, I don't know. I just think
Mhm.
it's not ideal, but you can still make it work. But you just have to put a little more effort in as the coach.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think you can still make it work. I think there's like a little bit of a shift around um, realizing our role that when we step into these scalable formats, it's a little bit less hand-holdy. Like obviously I know you're working with kids, so there's still going to be like some hand-holding going on there. But it's a lot of like, how can I use the infrastructure of this offer to give them more support? Like, so exactly like you said, is it they can submit things and I give them like asynchronous feedback? Is it that you use breakout rooms that you can like pop into on Zoom so you kind of feel like you're walking around the virtual classroom? Like thinking about like all sorts of things. There's a lot of tech that can help you as well. But I think really realizing that you're like, oh yeah, this is like, it's going to draw on a new set of skills and then a new set of mindset gremlins can sometimes pop up as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you for that, Emily. I appreciate it.
Welcome. You're welcome. Okay, so we've got a few more questions in here. Let's see. Yeah, Paula's asking about, I've hit a lesson which can become ginormous. How do you select what to include and what not to include? Kelly, love your response here about starting with what they need to do versus what is nice to do, which is exactly what we're going to talk about next. So I'll go into that a little deeper there. And then Kelly, I see you have your hand up for a question. I think you're muted. Okay.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was having technical difficulties there. It wouldn't let it would I could click it, but it wouldn't actually do anything, my unmute button. So, okay. My question is, so I know you kind of know my general area. We're very similar. I'm not trying to copy you or steal your ideas. I just wanted to make that very clear. But in my market, or using marketing language, is solopreneur service providers who want to create their first signature course. And I work with, I've added in that I just left out the word established kind of service providers. 1.5+ years of experience, have worked one-on-one with clients, like Wendy, was talking about working one-on-one with her students. And my first course is, but I don't know how to frame it, I guess, position the transformation is all about getting started on your course, moving from that dream stage, that idea stage, to that doing, and actually taking action on designing and planning the course, such as, journey mapping. I don't use that term or anything, don't worry. And how to narrow down a topic that is manageable, specific enough, that itself is focused on, like you were talking about, the action and not just the information. And I've titled it Course Creation Kickstarter, but I just don't know, I guess, is that, and I have specific action steps. They move from broad topic to audience to narrowing their topic, making it more specific based on the people who they talk to, their research, blah, 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 to eventually in 10 weeks, making an journey mapping, in the sense of, again, again, I don't use that term, but kind of making an outline or a mind map or concept map or anything like that of their course. Anyway, and it's in 10 weeks. I didn't want to make it too long because that defeats the purpose of action. They could be doing this forever. I just don't know how to label that or frame that transformation of you're finally going to be doing something here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is where, like the language that you use is so powerful. And I think also because they are leaving with a deliverable, that can sometimes help anchor the transformation, because yes, we don't want to only focus on deliverables and like, features and things like that, but it can be a helpful anchor point. And so like, for instance, like that's the same, like in my self-study programs, like in Course Creation Magic, that's the endpoint of the Course Creation Magic transformation, which is you're going to walk away with your detailed program map. Like you're going to have a blueprint of everything that you need to know, because I know often what happens, what gets people overwhelmed is they're like, wait, they have this loose bullet list of things they need to talk about. And then they sit down to record their videos and they go, wait, what am I talking about? Do I even want to do video? I feel awkward, all these things. And so I was like, okay, that's one major milestone, is getting your blueprint or whatever language you want to use for that done. And so I think similarly for yours, you could, if you have that kind of like, I think the one thing I would like maybe tweak for you is the idea of like get started, because that's a pretty significant milestone. Like I think you could use words like accelerator, like accountability pod, or like something like that, because I think about like get started feels like, okay, let's build some momentum. But if you're guiding them all the way through to having like a detailed curriculum or having some sort of program map, then like that's a pretty hefty milestone. I mean, like I think about in the incubator, like that's the first milestone that unlocks a call with me, is like you've got this macro structure laid out, and now let's talk about it. So I think not shying away from the fact that like that's pretty big, and being able to say like, okay, you're going to have this map, and what is made possible by having this map. You can make clear production plans, you know what needs to be created. You can now build a timeline of like how to actually create and launch this course. And I mean, that'd be great for you to like upsell like an accountability, something off the back end of that too. But I think maybe instead of like get started, it's more like do the thing with me.
Okay, awesome. That gives me so much clarity. And kind of, and I'll shut up after this point. It's the larger, or I guess underneath the surface level goal is to give them confidence and clarity in their decision-making process about their course. Right? Because so people, like you said, the overwhelm, so many questions. Where do I start? I have no idea. I have too many ideas, all that. And a lot of it's also mindset, the imposter syndrome, etc. And so I think by finally doing it, and the accelerator, and the accountability, I love that, will give them some of that confidence and clarity. And also with, like you said, I wrote in my comments, kind of the hybrid, and Wendy was talking about too, the hybrid approach of the one-on-one group, etc. So anyway, I thank you. That helped me tremendously. And like I said, I'll be quiet and let you answer the chat questions.
Thanks. And it's all good. Take up space. It's good. That's why we have these calls. So I'm glad that was helpful. Okay, let's see here. We've got Kimmy says, I've taken an audio course. What do you think of mixing audio with visual? I was thinking audio when I'm not showing what needs to be done. Yes. So I have a love-hate relationship with audio courses. I think they can absolutely serve a time and a place. Like it can, especially for kind of more reflection journeys or things where it's like, think about this, or it's a mindset lesson, or it's meditative, or it's grounding. I find when they're more tactical, like you don't need to show what needs to be done, but you're like talking through it, for people who need some sort of visual or something to help ground them in. Like I think about specifically for myself being neurodivergent, I have a hard time learning just through audio only. And whether you're neurodivergent or not, it also can be a thing where people can get a sensation of, oh, I've binged all the content. Like I've listened to 8 lessons, but they're not necessarily getting the pauses to implement. So I think audio can be really, really powerful when it's very intentionally used. Like, let's say, for instance, your audience is busy moms that like, they barely have time to sit down and watch a course or like do a course. So they're like, they've got like a headphone in one ear and like a baby on their hip, and they're like vacuuming with one hand because they're all like super people. That could be really powerful as long as the audio is very intentionally like, pause, don't keep listening, don't listen to anything else until you've done this step. Or the action is something very like, okay, your action is to reflect on this question for the rest of the day. Because if it's like a version of like, a bit more tactical of a course, like we're building a sales page or we're writing content, and someone might like power ahead without taking action, it can be a little bit demotivating. So I would say kind of like, think about what is it you're teaching and what do they need to do as a result of teaching that? And that will maybe help you make the choice between, should this be audio? Should this be visual? Should this be text? And then of course, making sure there is a transcript version for people who can't hear. So kind of it depends. And if you want to add more context into the chat, we can also talk about like different ways of thinking about it too, if that's helpful. And then Paula says, would you think dripping content across the 4 weeks of the program helps relieving overwhelm in students? So this is a great question. And it's so funny because I've been having a lot of conversations about this in my DMs after my post talking about drip content. So in general, I'm not a huge fan of dripping content, because I find that for the person who is motivated and they've got momentum and they want to move ahead, and then you're going, nope, you don't get access to this, it can be really like, oh, you're holding me back. And like motivation is one of the, like, it is our sacred currency in the online learning space. We want to capitalize on motivation. We want to capitalize on momentum. And so if someone is like, I bought your course, I'm excited, I want to get in, let me do all the things. And then all of a sudden they've done lesson or module 1, and then like, I have to wait a week. It can be a bit like, oh, like you're holding me back. So, and I can also see the other side of it where it's like, oh, I have access to all this stuff, I have to do all these things all at once. Now I feel overwhelmed. So the way that we can honor both of those needs, one is very much by having like the drip be based on completion. So they don't see it all at once, but if there's actions they have to do, they do the action, and then that unlocks other things. So it's not time bound, it's like action bound. Another is having like an email sequence that runs along with the course that says, hey, you get access to everything all at once, but over the next 4 weeks, I'm going to be sending you these emails, and it kind of gives you a sense of what to be focusing on when, in case you're feeling overwhelmed. You can give people calendars. Like one of the things that I added into the incubator for the second round was like a big checklist of like, here's what to do in what order, here's the reference modules, here's the milestones, to really give people a sense of like what you should be doing and when. So there's a way that you can kind of like honor both needs, but in general, I don't love dripping content. It's one of the things I use very selectively. And to answer your earlier question, I'm going to talk about kind of the next step after journey mapping. So I'm loving all of these questions. These are all so great. So as other questions come up, please feel free to pop more things in the chat. I'm going to kind of talk about the next step in managing content overwhelm as we're designing out our programs. And of course, if you have clarifying questions, feel free to use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or like I said, pop it in the chat. So we have our journey mapped out. We have a sense of where are people starting? Where are we taking them to? Do they have something like clear and deliverable, like we were saying with Kelly's course about like, okay, you've got this program map, or you've got a study plan, or you've got, like, what are these things that you have? And we also know how they're feeling, how they're thinking, what's shifting. So now what we really want to do is think about, we know the beginning, we know the end. So how do we organize everything that has to go in between? So the first thing I want you to do is ask yourself, what do they need to do to move from the beginning to the end, to have this transformation? Not what do they need to know, not what information, not what do they need to understand, what do they need to do? And this is where I invite you to very much make a mess. So you can do this virtually with like virtual post-it notes on like a whiteboard. Like I can share my screen and show you afterwards. There's one that I've made for my students, like help you do it virtually. You can do it in like physical with like actual post-it notes, or like some people, if you think more like in a list, you can like dump it all out in a Google Doc and like cut and paste and move things around. But I want you to think about, what do people need to do? Do they need to identify their bad study habits? Do they need to create space in their schedule to work on their course? Do they need to cut off contact with a toxic ex? I have a client who's a breakup coach, so her stuff's in my mind. Thinking about what are the actions they need to take. And I want you to just like dump them all out. And they can either be like really big, like, that will break up into smaller ones. So like in the incubator, one of the things people need to do is they need to launch their course. Obviously that's massive. So then we can break it up smaller, like, okay, we need to draft your sales page. We need to add visuals to your sales page. We need to write your launch emails. We need to choose your launch approach. So really thinking about using your verbs of what do people need to do. And once you have this like big, giant dump out list of all of your action steps, you'll start to see patterns. You'll have an intuitive sense, being the expert, of like what needs to come first, like how do we sequence them, how do we group them, and it's going to start giving you a sense of the flow through the program. And as you're looking at the action steps, if you're ever like, oh, I'm not sure which one they need to do first, you can ask yourself, like, what do they need to have done in order to take this next step? Is there anything they're missing? Is there anything that needs to set them up for success? Is there any blocks that are going to get in their way? Like, oh, they need to officially open their course for sale. And it's like, okay, but if you're feeling imposter syndrome, if you're feeling not confident on your messaging, if you're feeling like, oh, I'm not in love with the structure of my program, maybe you won't do that. So what actions do they need to take? This is going to be a very iterative process, and it takes time. Like this, like usually when I'm doing this with my clients, like this takes a few weeks. Like this often I find in the incubator, people dedicate like quite a good amount of time to getting a sense of like, what do people need to do and how do I group and sequence these actions, and then look at them again and go, is there any hidden action? Because often sometimes we can think very literal about like, yeah, this is the action I need to take, but we're not taking into consideration like, do they have limitations on time that we need to address? Do they have limitations on mindset that needs to be addressed? Do they feel not confident and we need support? Do they need accountability? Do they need tools and resources? So really digging into, what do my people need to do? Once we have this giant list of what do they need to do, similar to what Kelly said in the comments, we can also look at this and be like, where we turn on our inner critic. This is where they can serve us. And we can ask ourselves, looking at that transformation, looking at where we want to bring people to, do they really need to do that? Is it absolutely necessary? Is it a need to do or like a nice to do? And if it's a nice to do for now, I want you to take it and like put it in a bucket, like just put it somewhere. You don't have to get rid of it entirely. It might be a good bonus. It might be a good extra, but we really want to think about only the essentials, because we're going to do the same process when we start thinking about what do I need to teach to help them take action. Now that we know what they need to do, we need to ask ourselves, what do I need to teach them so that they can take action? And similar, we want to go, what do they need to know, not what's a nice to know? What do they need to know, not what's a nice to know? And this is where I see a lot of people getting a bit of a stumbling block. And I'll say this with just like so much love, because I've definitely been there too. But as service providers, we have a lot of control in a one-to-one container. If people aren't clear, if they're not happy, if they're getting stuck, we can swoop in, we can do it for them, we can walk through them, we can add another call, we can like really dig in. And when we move into a scalable format, we're surrendering a bit of control and we are empowering our people, like what I was talking about with Wendy, around like using the infrastructure, the architecture of our program to support them. And so what can happen is when we start to feel a little bit of that loss of control, when we start to feel maybe a little bit uncertain in ourselves as teachers, like that imposter syndrome comes through, this is where we can become like a little bit like that overbearing parent who's like, oh, you're going to go play with your friends on the playground. Take an umbrella, take a snack, take a jacket, take a sweater. What if you get cold? Take a scarf. What about this? And we just throw all of the things into the program, thinking that we're helping people for those what if scenarios. What if you're confused by this? What if you're lost about that? What if you need to imply it in this way? And what ends up happening more often than not is all of a sudden our people are buried under content that we gave from a place of love, when in reality, they don't need it. They just need like, tell me what to do, help me do it. Great, I'm good. So asking yourself, what are the needs to do? What do they need to do to take action? What do they need to know to take that action? And if it's a nice to have, if it's a nice to know, if it's a nice to do, take it out for now. Just sit with it and see how it feels. So before I go any further, I want to check in. I want to see, how is this all feeling? Or what questions have come up when you're thinking about your programs, thinking about the actions that you want to include? If you feel like there's a piece of content that you're like, is this a need to know or a nice to know? We can like workshop it together. Feel free, you can either use the raise hand feature or you can pop it in the chat. I see that Paula has another question here. I've seen people using exercises and homework to release the following section, but personally, I find it holds me stuck. Yes, so thinking about like the dripping the content again and like holding people back. I'm the same way. Like I really don't like it when people tell me how I have to move through a course. I'm like, I just bought this, like give me access to everything. I've had like a deep-seated rage for drip content for a long time, but I remember joining this membership and they made me watch this like 45-minute welcome video. And as part of signing the membership, they said there was going to be like 6 courses I got access to. What they didn't say is that they were dripped out and you only got access to them one by one. So the course I wanted was 4 months into the membership. So it's like very sneaky and manipulative from a marketing perspective because they're forcing retention in the membership because they've decided like, you have to do these things in this order. But I always come back to reminding ourselves that like, we need to trust in the inherent wisdom of our people. We need to trust that our people are really freaking smart and they can get what they need when they need it. And if they decide to like jump ahead and watch a bunch of stuff, then they get confused because they didn't like do it in order. And then they're like, I'm confused. You can say like, hey, slow down. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's walk through this. Like, that's fine. Or if you have a bunch of courses available to them and they're jumping all over the place, like, cool. People are going to get what they need when they need it. And our job is to remove barriers, not add them back in. So full permission to like, not hold them back if it doesn't feel good. Okay. And then, do you think it's better to enroll people in cohorts or evergreen with office hangouts? So this is kind of a combination of personal preference and your subject matter. So there's definitely pros and cons to both. Obviously, whenever we have cohorts for live programs, there's going to be a bit more pressure on launching because we're going to need to have these big launch cycles to fill up these cohorts. As we get to be more well-known, then we might have wait lists and it might take a bit of pressure off, but there is a bit more launching attached to cohort-based programs. And also they can be really powerful, especially if you have any sort of like sensitive, vulnerable subjects. It can be really like bonding to know that it's a closed container. People aren't coming in and coming out and you're like talking about something really sacred. So there can be something that's just really nice about like, oh yeah, like we're going through this experience together. And for Evergreen, I also really love it. Like the incubator is rolling. It's a group program, but people can apply whenever they want and join whenever they want. And what I love about that is I constantly have people at different points in the program creation cycle. So someone will be just about to launch as someone comes in. And so they're like, oh, I'm just starting to map out my course. And the person who's launching is like, oh my gosh, that's where I was a couple months ago. Like, this is so exciting. So there's something that's like really powerful about like people being at different stages in the journey, being able to cheer each other on. I also love it because I know that my audience has all sorts of different launch cycles in their business. Like it's not like, oh, everyone is launching in the fall, so I can start them back in the spring. So I like being able to have it be like, you come in whenever you want, like, let me help you out. Like, let's get your program designed and built and launched so you can like get it out there in the world. And I'm not telling you when that has to happen. So like I love Evergreen personally, but I can definitely see like a time and a place, like for cohort, like for instance, this coming January for some of my private clients, I'm going to be doing a mastermind and that's going to be cohorted. So it's going to be 6 months of like the same group of people on the same journey together. So you get to have a mix and match. You can totally lean into like what feels good for you and like what kind of lights you up for your format. Oh, you're so welcome. Okay. Any other questions coming up before we carry forward? You're welcome to like unmute, just be like, I have a question, or you can pop something in the chat or use the raise hand feature. Truly, any questions we've been talking about for keeping things actionable, being intentional about your nice to knows versus your need to knows.
I am not able to check everything on my phone. I was driving there, but I guess I really like the idea of the conversation around like going at your own pace. I find that I have a few recordings already, like there, just like if you want to like understand something more fully or you want to go ahead. But when I have things that are skill building, I find if I give it all to them, they get kind of overwhelmed. So just from experience, so I kind of like giving them so much and then they take action and we come back and reflect on it and we just build on it. And not everything is that way, of course, that you teach, but I find that's one way to help them actually avoid overwhelm.
Yeah, I love that. And I think especially with like, whether it's literally a younger learner or someone who's younger in the sense of like being beginner in the subject matter, the kind of like spoon feeding can be really nice of like, I want you to practice these skills. Like, I don't want to go ahead because you're going to like get overwhelmed or you're going to get stuck. And so this is where like always reminding ourselves there's no one size fits all approach to creating offers. And anyone who tells you that there's the one right way to do things, like, they're an idiot.
Yeah, no way.
To them. No way. And so I think this is like such a good thing of like, this is what I've tried and this worked well, or this didn't work well, or I heard this feedback, or I heard this. And so it's always like that permission to lean into what feels good, to try things and know that you can change. Like, this is the other thing that I just encourage everyone to like really like sink in, is that your program's a living, breathing creature. It's going to evolve. It's going to change. You're going to get feedback. You're going to adjust things. So like sometimes we can also like put so much pressure on ourselves to get it right the first time, when in reality, like I say this all the time to my clients, like, we are going to design the most incredible program. And I want you to feel obsessed with it. And there probably will still be pieces that are going to change. Like, that's why we're going to check in and see how things are going.
Right.
Even like, I think about the very, very first round of the incubator was 12 weeks. It was a cohort based, and I was going to live teach it as we went. So like every week I was like, we're going to have a specific thing and that's going to be your homework for the week. And within like 4 weeks, everyone was behind and all over the place. And I was like, okay, so maybe this approach isn't quite rolling out the way I thought it would, which is when I switched to like, I'm going to lead you through, I'm going to give you a pathway through my curriculum. We're going to go at your own pace. So you can kind of, I'm going to tell you what to do when, but you get to decide how it feels for you. And it's like, I never would have known if I hadn't just tried it out to see how it lands for people.
Yeah, Emily, I do the same thing in that I like to, when I'm teaching something that everybody could have little different areas of strengths and areas that need improvement, it's more like I talk about something, then I say, well, what are you going to do today, tomorrow, and this week that's going to change you know, and get you the results you want. And they sit there and they just brain dump what they could
Mm.
do. And then we set actionable goals, and I teach them how to set and state an actionable goal, and then they put it in their calendar.
Yeah, I
And
love
so
that.
it's just all about, so they don't feel overwhelmed, like, oh, I'm going to leave here with specific things to do, that not everything that we talked about, but just what do I need?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that for all of us, I guess from years of it, I'm learning ideas from you, but like that's one thing I've learned for people, that people need to personalize what you're teaching or sharing. I just
Yeah.
find that that helped them get results.
Hmm.
And then they
Yeah.
checked it off when it was done, versus just a, like today, if we didn't take notes and write down steps to do, it's like, well, that's interesting, Emily, but did I gain anything different from being here?
100%, 100%. And I love that, like, you're like, the personalization is like so at the core of what you do. And I think that's like, it's so powerful because, like you said, if we're like, oh, everyone has to do this one thing, and then someone's like, but that's not the thing that's going to help me, and then they're like spiraling and they're not taking any action, instead of being like, let me teach you a framework of thinking, let me give you accountability to help you figure out what needs to happen, let me give you examples. Like, even like, like, one of the things I actually love is when, like, my students don't listen to me because when they're like, you know what, I tried this and I didn't like this, or like, you know, I know you said this, but like, I'm going to do it this way. I go, great. Like, for me, as long as the decision is intentional, it's not made from a default, then I'm happy. Because I think there's like that thought process that goes into it of like, I've tried it this way, I like this. I've seen my students say this thing, I'm going to do it this way. This is really important to me as a facilitator, so I'm going to show up like this. It's like, that's why, like, intentionality, I think, is so key. So I love that you have that at the forefront of your mind.
Well, and that's what I'm liking from what you're saying, is we've just got to get it out there
Mhm.
and be flexible about it. And one of the things I think I learned the most from doing one-on-ones is nobody really wants to go back and watch the whole replay. Let's just own that. They don't. They
Mhm.
have there's no time for that. So I create Google Docs with pictures of slides and the notes we're taking, and then action steps, and we make comments, and then we can comment both on it at the same time. And it just, then they're like, I can just go back and look at what you left, that Google Doc, and I know exactly what I need to do.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
they love it.
Yeah.
And so I think that for all of us, so have started taking, like, I've learned some things from my group coaching and teaching at Ohio State to make my one-on-ones better, but I also learned things in my one-on-one to make my group coaching better. So I think just the more
Mhm.
that we teach your stuff, teach what you're good at, and make it, like, I think your biggest thing that I think you're so smart to emphasize to all of us is, like, what do they need to do to apply it? Because that's when they're going to come back and want to work with you again.
100%. Absolutely. Where it's like, okay, how do we move from information and content overwhelm, which is like, you know, theme of today. And I also want to say, I'm like, I don't have a hard stop at 11:30, so there'll be time for more questions. Because I know we're coming up on the hour mark. So there'll be lots of time for questions after as well. But very much, I think that's the theme for like the content overwhelm, like both from when we are mapping things out for our learners and wanting to create this very intentional journey, and also for ourselves, is just like, okay, what needs to be done? Like, what do I need to do to move the needle? Like, how can I strip away the extras and the fluffs and like the, you know, like, let's just really get down to like, what do I need to do? What is the simplest thing that I can put into action right now? And, you know, our role as facilitators, as leaders, is continually coming back to that place of, how do I make it easier or easefuller? Because it's not always easy, but there's more ease to it, to help people take action. And whether that's clarifying and simplifying, you know, I love having kind of multimodality and learning experiences, like pathways of like, you can do it this way or you can do it that way. You don't
Yeah.
have, like, I'm such a firm believer in like, you can do it any way you want. The most important way is your way. But sometimes people hear that and they're like, yeah, great, but can you tell me your way? Like, can you just tell me what to do?
Yeah.
And so being able to give choice. Oh, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I love that. Absolutely love everything you said. And I think that's part of it is I think the benefit of the group then too is when people start sharing things, then it's like, oh, you know, Emily talked about this, but we're all kind of tweaking it and personalizing it. So to me, it's like, when I think about, because I just want to be transparent and honest. And so that's the way I think anybody of integrity is going to run their business. But it's about going to what you're going to leave with when we think about, like, when you talk about what you do, it's like, oh, that makes it appealing to work with Emily. It sounds approachable. It sounds doable. And then for me, it's like, so for my clients, I want them to feel like I feel when I have a conversation with you, it makes me feel like that's a possibility. That doesn't seem like I'm going to be in a world of overwhelmed. So think about one of the biggest features is at every session, you'll walk away knowing what to do next. And with steps that you're going to take, actionable steps that you chose to take to get results. I think that's what feels, especially like, so I sell to parents, but I serve students, and the students have to buy in, but the parents are like, oh yeah, baby, they need this.
Yeah.
And the thing that's like a misconception is about 25 to 40%, depending on, the month or whatever, of my students are already on the dean's list. It's just maintaining those top grades that can be overwhelming.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's not like, oh, well, my kid's not struggling. Great. It's not if it's going to get hard, it's when.
Yeah.
They may not need me to their junior year. Great. But every student that I've gotten is like, wow, I wish I would have had this sooner.
Yeah.
And so the same thing, like for me, I've done courses. Well, I've developed entire courses at Ohio State. So, but it's different when I'm like trying to like minimize it and maximize it at the same time, right? Like things that you're talking about. I don't have to follow anybody else's rules anymore. And I can do it my way.
Yeah, you can do it your way. And I think like, I just love that there's like this like meta journey where you're like, oh, I'm kind of going through this process of like, how do I think about things for like my work and my courses and the support I need and how I want to adapt it. And then it's like a similar mirroring over to how you talk about your program. And I think it's like, there's just something that just feels so like, like expansive and like spacious. Like, I know that's something I've heard from a lot of people is this idea of like, oh, like I don't have to like force myself into one way of doing things and then feel bad when it doesn't work or feel bad when I don't want to take action. Like you can say, okay, based on what you've said, here are 3 options. Which one feels good for you? Or like, based on what you're sharing, like, what do you think you need to do next? And so I think there's just something so powerful. And I would really encourage you to like bring that forward in your messaging of like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not going to tell you, here's my system. I'm going to help you create and craft a system and a support and a flow that works for you, because then it's like, takes less energy and it feels better and feels more supportive and all those things. Like, I just think that's so powerful.
I love that. And I think the one thing that I always have to keep in mind is I don't know when they show up what's happened since the last time I saw them. Because some clients I work with twice a week, some once a week. And I'll say, okay, when we last left off, we kind of had, I said it to them, or I always like take notes and make a little, while it's fresh in my mind, a little itinerary for what's next steps based on them. But then I'll be like, okay, I have a plan, but is that the right plan for today? Like, where are you? And then I'll have kids say like, I know I blew off this one class and now I have a test in 4 days. And I know I need a study plan, but I need to do a cramming plan. Can you help me do that? I'm like, absolutely. Everything else can wait. That's a priority today. And so I think that's the benefit of one-on-one. You can put out any fire you need to exactly when you need it put out. But I struggle a little bit. And the reason I brought that up is, so I don't want the one-on-one sound is so amazing to put down how fabulous a group program is. Do you kind of find that can be a little bit hard to do?
I think it depends in terms of how you want to delineate your one-to-one versus the group. And so like, for instance, like I think about for the incubator versus my private coaching, one obviously is like we were talking about the price factor, like, for me to guide someone through designing out your signature program is $7,500 versus for the incubator, it's $4,400 or like $1,100 a month for 4 months. And so there's instantly a price difference, which is one differentiator. And also being able to talk about like, is it the level of client, is it the depth that you're going into? Is it that someone's looking for a different experience or a different type of guidance? And so really thinking about like, what is the difference between the two? And I mean, again, I think it's coming back to like, trusting your people's intelligence. Like, obviously, if you're going to have weekly or bi-weekly one-on-one time, people are going to know there's going to be a significantly more depth. Like, I'm going to be your partner in this together every single step of the way. And with the group, it doesn't have to necessarily be like oh, well, my one-to-one's so much better, but if you can't afford that, then I guess this will do. Like, that's not the energy. It's a matter of
because I don't feel that way about it at all.
No. And so I think letting that come through, it's like saying, like, for me, like, I am obsessed with the incubator. Like, I love it. I mean, I was going to like talk about this in a few minutes, but like, it's on promo right now where like it's a 4-month commitment, but right now people can sign up and get a 5th month as a bonus. And you can decide if you want to start now, you want to start in the fall, we can talk about that. But like, I know it's not like, oh, my one-to-one's amazing, but if you can't afford to work with me, come in the incubator, because I've really designed it in a way that I'm like obsessed with it. I'm like, oh my gosh, you get these weekly calls where you get to connect with other people on your journey and get ideas. And like, we can get feedback on what you're working on. You get these one-to-one moments with me where like you still get some one-to-one touch points around your program structure, your launch plan. You get, you know, a copywriter reviewing your sales page. We're going to go through, I'm going to review and do Loom reviews of all the things. So like, I've included stuff in the program that makes me like, well, if you want to create your course and get it out there and launch it in a way that feels fun, why wouldn't you join? Like, it's like almost like a, I'm so obsessed with it. And so I think the more that you can lean into that for your group program, where you're like, yeah, you know what, like my one-to-one is great. And like, we can go really deep. And also I've created this group program that's like a hybrid. And sometimes honestly, not calling it a group program, finding like a different word can be helpful. Like it's an immersive experience. It's an incubator. It's an accelerator. It's a, sometimes even like we can start to create that with the word group program. So permission to use different language if that feels better. But if it's like, oh my God, it's so cool because like we get together and like we have these calls, but then in between the calls, I've actually created a, I don't know, a group Miro board with slides where we can all comment on things together. And there's this like digital collaboration that's happening asynchronously. Or once a month, you have these back pocket calls with me, or we have a social media group where we hang out, or like whatever it is, like truly the sky is the limit, where like the more excited you can be, like I almost think a fun challenge would be, can you get to the point where you're actually more excited about your group program than your one-to-one, where like your one-to-ones almost start to feel a bit like, yes, if you had to work with me one-to-one, you could, but why wouldn't you join this group program? It's amazing. Like it might be a fun challenge to play with.
I think the naming is really a really cool angle to think about, because group coaching, it sounds like, oh, my kid is too busy, they need it personalized, but you benefit so much from just being in the group, like you're saying, like, because my program is called Stronger Student, because that's the whole point. You can become a stronger student. Just like, like that's what we all want to be academically, and it's not just academics. So yeah, so I guess I need to, like I say, at some point it's a group coaching program, but I like the word accelerator. Ooh, isn't that a sexy word that you used?
Yeah.
Like to accelerate your growth. Like whether I'm a coach creator listening to you talk about your group, and I'm like, ooh, that sounds really interesting. So I think it's good to hear you just kind of like off the cuff rattle off about it. And I want to be able to do that, as making mine sound as if, I don't know, maybe I do already, and I just need to record myself and see if I think how I could tweak it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that you are thinking about the things. And then when you talk about what you put in your program, you think about how much would it cost to have a copywriter look at your stuff? How much would it cost to get those reviews? And people just have to really think about, like, copywriting is my nemesis. Presenting is my strength. And so we often think like, well, when you hear someone talk about things that your area that could use, I guess weakness is what the truth it is to me. It is the thing that takes me the most time to do well.
Yeah.
And so like, we all are going to be listening to what you say and be like, oh, what do I need the most? Is that in there?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so if that's in there, then the whole program is going to be more appealing to you.
Yes.
And so I have to be that's why I have to be sure I mention kind of like the big things that are in my program, so that parents realize, oh, my kid needs this and this. But I've never had a kid say, oh yeah, I didn't need any time management. Nobody has ever, right?
Yeah.
They don't pull out the same things. And then I've taught more than one course, and the students were like, can I take the other course? I'm like, well, of course there's going to be a little overlap on certain things, because the science of how you learn is the science of how you learn. But the cool things they would even say is, oh my goodness, I just did something different. Like it was a similar lesson, not the same, but on some things, they're like, well, maybe, I don't know, 25% of the course was same content, basic, but they're like, oh, but I was at a different place taking different classes. So it was still wonderful. And so that's what I would think, even if someone like, oh, I have one course. Oh, Emily, I still need you for the next course. Like do you find that people do that?
Yeah, I do. I love it because I mean, like exactly like you said, like everyone's at a different point when they hear different things. And so, I find like once clients work with me once, like they come to me for all their programs, or I have people who are like, oh, I did one course this way. And, one thing I hear a lot is people are like, oh, I never launched it, or I launched it once, then I never talked about it again, because they're not sure why. And then once we dig into it, it's like, oh, because you don't like it. You don't like the course. You either don't believe in it, or there's parts of it that you don't want to deliver, or there's something that doesn't feel good. So I'm like, okay, light that on fire and build you something that you love. And also like light all the marketing principles on fire and launch it in a way that you love, so that you can like really, really get what you need when you need it. And so I think like, I love that you're thinking about that for your students too, where they're like, oh, I want to think about it this way, or I want to go into this toolbox and see what I can get, or what would like light them up. And like, maybe you do something like super fun, like on the sales page, you have, you know, parents watch this video, students watch this video, or like something where you almost are speaking to both people, or like bringing them both into the process. Like I've had one of my previous incubator members did a parent and student program. And so we were thinking about how can we speak to both people in the resources and how it's structured. So I think there's so many fun things you can do.
Yeah, and I actually decided that I think I'm going to do, I haven't decided if I'll do it in like Heartbeat or Facebook. I'm just not the social media girl, like my own personal life. So that just is always a little bit of a struggle. But I think that parents want to know what's going on. The kids don't always tell them. Some do, some don't, but just like, okay, so this week we're really focused on these skills. And I just think, or I might even just do it on my business, Facebook business page, because that'll be seen more. And then people will be like, oh, my kid needs that. Ooh, like I was thinking like, that might be a way to like support my group, but yet the parents can find out without feeling like they're nagging their kid about what's going on. And I don't mean that it's nagging, but if a student is struggling, then some are more receptive to reaching out to parents than others. Because I'll say, call your parents up and tell them everything you're learning about in your hardest class that you learned in, you know, that you learned that week, because that will help you strengthen your neural connections, which will help you remember it on your test. Hello, right? And and I was with a former client, and the mom's like, she keeps telling me about what she's learning. And I'm like, well, she's going to med school. She's learning a lot. Or
Yeah.
she's not going, she's an undergrad, but she's, you know, studying and getting ready for med school. And I was just, and she's like, but she calls me a lot and I really like it. So it's okay. You know, it was kind of funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's,
oh, I
it's
love
just,
that.
I think it really is about the group thing. When someone else brings up a question or says something, I know I'll be like even today, I was like, oh, that's a great question. You know, so I like a group setting with a little bit of, because I'm assuming in your incubator group that it sounds like people can post things for feedback on the regular.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a Slack community where people can ask questions and get feedback kind of outside of our calls. And then on our calls, they're 90 minutes. And I intentionally limit, there's only 12 people in the group at any given time, because I'm like, I don't want to have a group program where people get lost in the crowd. I know it's like a big fear of people with group programs where they're like, I'm going to come on this call and no one's going to answer my question, or whatever it may be. So it's about like making sure there's designated time for like feedback when you need it, how you need it, whether it's, you know, little feedback pieces where you share your screen on the call and we all kind of look at things, or there's specific milestones where I'm like, send me this and I will go through it with a fine tooth comb.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Okay, I see Paola's got some questions here. And of course, for those of you who are still on the call, if you have other questions, feel free to pop them in the chat and we can keep talking. It doesn't just have to be about content, it can be anything with your programs, your courses, launching, all that good stuff. Okay, so Paula asks, what do I think of courses and programs with 1-year access? I'm not keen. Same. I don't like restricting access when it's a self-study program. Now, if it's live access in like, you know, an intimate space, like we were just talking about with group coaching, where there's like, I intentionally limit the pod size to 12 people, therefore like it can't just be lifetime access, is different. But when it's a self-study course, like all of my self-study programs are lifetime access. Of course, lifetime in your terms and conditions is lifetime of the program, not like your life forever. I have had programs that I retire, and then what I just do is I send people a Google Drive with all the materials and I say, download it all, it's yours. I told you you get it for life, but I'm no longer maintaining it. I'm no longer doing this. So like, I know some people are like, oh, I don't like the idea of evergreen. I feel like it locks me in, and it's like, it's okay. There are options. But I've seen people do it. I've had clients do that for programs where there's like live access, but it's still like, you know, there's 50 people in the program at a given time and there's like live calls and things. That starts to then again kind of fall into the like cohort based programs. Based on what you and I have talked about for your program, Paula, I don't think you need to limit the access. I like the idea of it being like they have it as long as they need it, because like you said, like they're kind of nurturing that relationship with their pet as they go along. So it's like they're going to want to kind of come in and grab it whenever they need. And then next question is, if offering a community area for students, can this be the same area as the membership, which would be free for 2 months, or for the course of students, or would you contain them in a separate dedicated community? Okay, so if I'm understanding this right, there's kind of a community space that's going to be paid, that people who buy your course get free access for a few months, and then they have to pay to stay in the membership. Am I understanding that right? I'll just see. Yes. Okay, great. So I think there's a couple ways you can do this. One is if you want to have a community that's like not paid, that's as part of the course that they get forever access to, then I would do that separate and then say, but hey, I've got this membership over here, but then you're kind of maintaining two communities. So it gets a bit messy. If you're like, okay, you have the course, but there's no community attached with it, but as part of your course, you can unlock a free trial of this membership. I would almost have them opt into the membership as like a coupon code or something, so that they understand this is a separate offer. It's kind of like, hey, you bought this course. As part of this course, I'm giving you 2 or 3 months access free to my membership. Here's the sign up link. It starts your free trial. Just so you know, like, because it's a membership, you will put a credit card on file. And if you don't cancel, we'll give you tons of notice. We'll let you know what's happening, but like, this is just how it works. I think it will reduce some administrative burden, because it's not like you're putting them in, then when did they buy, we're moving them out, putting them in. Like there's some ways that you can automate it with tech, but I'm wondering, just to keep things like simple and streamlined, it's like, here's your course. And then you get this like really nice onboarding email sequence. Maybe it's mentioned in the course materials, hey, I've also got this awesome membership community that you get this like bonus access to. So here's the link to sign up for your trial. And then like, once they start up for the trial, you know, you give them a few emails to say like, just so you know, you're on a trial. It's going to end at this time. I'll let you know, hey, 2 weeks left, 1 week left, just so you know, that type of thing. That's kind of what I lean towards. Let me know how that feels for you, and what your thoughts are there. I know you said you couldn't unmute, so you can just type that out. Oh, good. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. Do we have any other questions, friends? Anything else you'd like to talk about today, or you'd like me to talk about? Talking about content overwhelm, designing our programs, taking the rule book and lighting it on fire.
I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
So usually when I work with students, I kind of feel like, to be honest, one semester is fantastic, but college students kind of are looking at me now like, what's the minimum I need? And I'm kind of like, I almost feel like once I get phase 1 going and like it's running regularly, I almost need phase 2. But I just feel like, do you ever feel like that there's part 1 of a course and then part 2?
Absolutely.
And so it's not like I'm trying to hold back, but it's, since some of it is sequential, it just is. Then,
Yeah.
so I don't know. I just kind of am struggling when they looked at the actions I want them to take. Well, not everybody's at the same starting point. But even with that, less than 3% of students use the most effective study strategy. So that's why I kind of can know that I'm starting at the same point for almost everyone.
Yeah.
And I would assume that they would kind of not need it at all if they're using most of the effective study strategies. They would probably just see like a executive functioning coach that specializes just in the application of some of the things I do on productivity. Like they wouldn't need me, but it's a small percentage of students. So I don't feel, but I still feel like when I'm like, oh, well, all the things I want them to do, well, you know, we have to like, I guess that's what you told me to think. Now that I'm thinking about like, what do they really need and what would be nice? But like, they need so much. They're such a hot mess sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I look back at me as a freshman, oh, the needs were great. You know, there's so much that they need. So I'm just kind of, I'm just trying to struggle between, if I only do an hour a week, it's going to take 8 weeks. I can't do it in a month like I'd like with one-on-ones. And are they going to feel like that's overwhelming? So I guess you don't know, do they say yes or no? But they feel so overwhelmed in college that first year. Or if the first year didn't go well, they feel really overwhelmed the second year.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm kind of just like, I guess just trial and error. I know, I guess I could always do it's a month and then they have the option to purchase the second month. You know what I mean? Or do I do it? Like, that's what I just, maybe I guess, do you sometimes ever just, maybe I should email my list, but they don't know what they don't know. I guess I'm keep rambling here. I'm afraid if I do 8 weeks, the students will be like, oh my gosh, that's forever.
Yeah.
Like that's forever. But once they're in it, they were like, oh my gosh, I'm setting time. I usually cut students' study time in half. I'm
Mhm.
having more fun. I don't feel so overwhelmed. Then they're going to want to stay. So that's where I'm
Mhm.
kind of struggling in my head with what's the right plan.
Yeah. So I feel like, I mean, as always, you've got options here. But what's
Yeah.
coming to mind is like, how do you feel about framing it and of less of like 8 weeks to like study skill mastery level 1 and more like this is your pod, this is your community for your semester. Like you come in and it's like 2 or 3 months or something like that. We're going to do some special stuff around exam season. Every week we're going to come together and they're still building out those skills. Like what I was picturing is almost like, I don't know if it works this way, but like, Cub Scout badges where it's like, you can build a fire, you can have a compass, you can look at the stars.
Hmm.
Like, it's almost like you need these various things in different orders, but like they, throughout the guidance of your program, we're going to help you like ding, get those badges or whatever it is. But instead of it being like 8 weeks to getting this, like, here's your strategy, it's more like, let's wrap it around what they're already doing. Like they're already moving through an academic term. So we're going to
Right.
go through this, we're going to do the guidance. Like it might mean maybe putting like a little bit more stuff into some self-study so they can access it if they need it faster, but then you're guiding them through it
Right.
on these weekly calls. But then you have some opportunity for fun things like, oh, it's reading break, we're going to have a co-working session, it's exam season, like we're going to have a prep session, and then we're going to have a giant like celebration afterwards or something. Like I wonder if framing it that way, and then they can choose to stay as many terms as they want. What do you think about something like that?
Well, there's things I like about what you said, and that I know that students never, like the students would ask me what else classes I taught. What are you doing next semester? So I know that that's an appealing thing, assuming they have time in their schedule, because I just make life easier for them, not harder, but easier. In most schools, not always, but on the West Coast, it can be a little different, but they start around the third-ish week of August for colleges that are on semesters in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's more schools on the West Coast that do quarters, and oftentimes they're not talking starting to mid-September.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I've had clients from all over the country, not every state, but you know what I mean, like from West
Yeah.
Coast to East Coast.
Yeah.
And I do my sessions that are group, usually at like 8:30 Eastern time, just because I feel if it's much later than that for some people on the East Coast, it's just too late.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I love the idea of the semester course, but to be honest, I almost like better doing it like 7 weeks for twice a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I have taught 7-week courses at Ohio State, and I
Yeah.
have taught full semester courses. And so I know I can do an amazing amount of work in 7 weeks, but I'm
Yeah.
just concerned about them thinking, oh, that's twice a week. Because I
Mm.
was going to do my private coaching with them for just 30 minutes. Because like you, I mean, I know I've taught semesters where I have 100 students, but not all in the same, like 4 classes, right? Spread
Mm-hmm.
out.
Yeah.
So that's where I think you're right. Like to me, it's like for kids that are struggling, that have a pain point, once a week sounds perfect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But actually there's a lot of, from what my students have told me, that they come and like they're either Monday, Wednesday classes or Tuesday, Thursdays, and they're like, my attendance is through the roof, and they're like, I need to be here Wednesday to keep momentum going. So that's the thing that makes me think twice a week. But then I get the kids are like, oh, that sounds like a job, because they're not required to go to it like a class. Like they don't have the mindset shift of this will help me. That's where I'm kind of like you, like ideally it'd be twice a week for the entire semester, and it would be amazing for them. But I don't think they just don't have the mindset of, oh, I want that much time, not realizing that it just makes your life better and easier. Like, just like if I was in your program for develop designing my course, it wouldn't be more work, it would be less work for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So I feel like that's where maybe your preference gets to like kind of take over a little bit, and like, just to try for one term and see, and whether it's, okay, I'm going to run it with like, it's these 2 calls, or you can say, I actually when you come into the program, there's 2 time slots and you can come to one or the other or both if you want. And then you're kind of giving people the option of like, if they're super keen beans, they can come to both or they can choose the one they want. Obviously that's more time in your schedule. So like, if it feels good, go for it. But if you're like, I just wanted one, then, you know, I find people always want more and they always want to move faster and they never do. It's like, I've had people who are like, you know, the incubator's 4 months and they go 4 months, that's a long time. And I'm like, I can almost guarantee you will need more time, but that's the minimum amount of time that I can comfortably promise you we could go from idea to launch if you were like aggressive with your time management. And so that's also where you get to ground into your expertise, and you can have it on the sales page. You can have it in your content where you can say, you can literally say it in their words, but like, but what about this? Like, but what about that? Like, oh, 2 times a week feels like a job, or like, oh, is 1 time a week enough? And it's like, yeah, because you're busy and you're keen and you're an honor roll student and you've got homework and you've got exams and you've got this and you've got that. So like, one, I don't want to add more into your schedule, but I also know that if you add anything in, add this, because it's going to open more space. It's going to open more time. It's going to make things easier. So that's where you can really just like the educating, the showing, the like, you know, here, like, I think if there's some way you can visualize it where it's like, here's what your schedule used to look like, here's what it looks like now that you have a plan that works, you know, like those types of things.
I love that when you said like, you think you only need 4 months or it's too long. You have no idea. Like that is so adorable. Well, and on the same note, the only thing is, so like we take the pain points that they're having, like you said, and it was easier because teaching at Ohio State, most exams, we had the same start date. So exams were always around week 4 and 5. And so we kind of knew that. And I kind of did it that way. But I think the perspective really is that this is to help your journey. The both calls are recorded, but you will want to come because like you're saying, you're going to make my life easier for you when I come to the incubator, or whoever is on the call. I'm making their life easier because I know exactly what steps to take. And then I was thinking of doing it to 45-minute call and then 15 minutes of Q&A.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you know, about approximately, you know, can vary. And because I feel that that, and really what it will be is like, you can't leave till you put your goal in the chat is how I do it. And then if I see they need any feedback, then I just message it to them. Like, you know, you need to state it. You don't like, it's not actionable. You just have an idea. Like what's the actual thing you're going to do?
Yeah. Bring this down, bring this down, bring this down.
Well, like, and then they get there. So it takes me a little time teaching them how to set goals that are actionable, but then they like it because then I can see by them writing them that they do it. And they personalize it. But just like anything we do, we get better at it. We just need a little feedback.
Yeah. Just need feedback, need support, need a bit of accountability. 100%.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I really appreciate that. So I guess you've given me some different ideas of like, whatever I do, I have to explain why in addition to like how it serves them. That's what I think that is the key.
Yeah.
And so did you ever have people like just put a little video talking about it, like you said, to the student and one to the parent, and they each have their own kind of that's because I thought about that, but I've never done it. You know how that is, like, oh, it's an idea, but when you haven't done it.
We love ideas. We love ideas. Oh no, okay. I want to answer Kimmy's questions and I'm going to come back around to some fun things you can do with sales pages. So I'm just going to put a pin in that. I'm going to jump over here. Okay. So Kimmy says, do you have to create a group with having a course? I don't have time to maintain a community. And like the short answer is no. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do, is kind of my philosophy around like the whole point of creating courses, creating scalable programs, whether it's a course, a group program, a workshop, is it's supposed to add something to our lives, whether it's adding revenue, it's adding space in our calendar, it's adding more impact, we can help more people. And we don't want to have elements of our program that are like, because that's where we get into that, like, kind of, we can self-sabotage of like, well, I don't want to sell my program because then that means there's going to be people in the community, which means then I have to maintain the community. So the main thing that I want you to keep in mind with your course is if you don't want to have a community, you can look at like, do you want to have some sort of live calls? Like, Paula, I love your suggestion here of like community and weekly calls. So it's kind of like, hey, like you can come on and like ask questions. When I first launched the Magic Suite courses, like my self-study courses, I had a Facebook group and I realized I really didn't like maintaining it. I was like, there wasn't a lot of activity in there because I didn't really like being in there because I didn't really like Facebook. And I was like, you know what? I want to just keep price of my course is low. And as a result, was able to do these course cafes for free that anyone who's in my programs can come to. And if they're like working through curriculum and they're like, hey, I'm in Course Creation Magic, I have this question, I'm still available to answer their questions without me having to be in a community, so that I can also pour more time into the Slack community for the incubator. So thinking about, do you want to have any space where they can ask you questions, or do you want it to be purely self-study? If you want it to be purely self-study, zero access to you, no community, no live calls, nothing, I encourage you to make the transformation smaller and more bite-sized, because then there's less opportunity for them to stumble along the way. And maybe think about adding in like an FAQ library, like as like maybe in the beginning when you have the course running for like 6 months, let people email you questions and you can record little video answers so you can see, are there certain areas where people are getting stuck? So then you can kind of start to premeditate, like, here's an FAQ library, or oh, I had to add in an extra lesson because everyone got stuck on module 3, kind of testing it out. And then you can kind of like cut down the access there. And then, so let me know how that feels for you, Kimmy, if you have any follow-up questions there. And I noticed you also asked, I work better one-on-one. Would it be best to offer like X amount of coaching calls? So when it comes to adding in one-to-one support back into our scalable programs, this is where we want to come into like our original intention of like, why are we creating this course, or why are we creating this program? Because if the idea is that we're like, I'm starting to max out one-to-one and I want more time in my schedule, but I also want to like scale my revenue, we want to be careful that we're not adding in one-to-one support because we don't fully feel confident in our self-study courses. So if we're doing that as a supplement, because we're like, oh, I think people are going to get stuck, I think people are going to have questions, then to me, that means it's an invitation to revisit the structure of the program and go, can I design this so that it stands on its own? It delivers the promise that I am offering as part of the sales page. And so that if people want to then come into one-to-one work, so for instance, like the one-to-one pieces I have in the incubator, it's if people didn't have those, they can still get the outcome I'm promising. You'll still be able to like build and launch and deliver a course that you love. But the one-to-one offers this point to go deeper, to get more customized, to get more personalized, to get more nuanced. So we want to make sure that it's like a value add, not like a scaffolding kind of like crutch to like support a gap in the curriculum. So if you love working one-to-one because you love the intimacy and the connection, like I love being able to like get my hands into what people are working on, then yeah, like absolutely as part of your program, you could say, hey, you get 2 30-minute back pocket calls. But if it's like a lower priced program, or it's totally self-study, or it's a smaller journey, I just want to make sure that you're not, you ask yourself like, oh, if I had 300 people buy my course, could I sustain that? Or if you're like, well, actually, no, because I only want 10 people to buy the course, then great. So we can kind of do these little like checks in with like what feels good for us, what our vision is, what's the volume that we want at once, what's the intimacy that we want, what's the revenue that we want, like coming back to that as like a decision-making tool. So let me know how that feels for you, Kimmy. Okay. All right. So I just want to have a note talking about fun things you can do on sales pages before we wrap up for today. So if anyone has any other questions you want me to touch on, feel free to pop them in the chat. I'm just going to talk about sales pages, check the chat one more time, and then we can call today Successful Cafe. So as I was mentioning with doing like videos, whether it's for like parents and for the kids, like we were talking about with Wendy, this is where you will notice a theme with what I'm talking about, which is there are no rules. And what I've noticed is people are so sick of the way things are done online, like with like the sales pages that always kind of roll with the like, do you feel this way? Do you wish you felt this way? Let me tell you this. Let me twist the knife on your pain points. Buy my thing. Save $1,000 because it's only $1 price. But for some reason, I'm telling you that bonuses are worth 16K. Like there's a lot of like just weird stuff that worked really well when the kind of online education, online business space first really started picking up steam. Same with like webinar launches and funnels. And people are smart and they're seeing through it and they're sick of it. And as a result, people are hungry for like authenticity, which means that you get to like really have fun. Like you really get to do whatever feels good for you. And so like, I love video. I love connecting with people. So like on the Incubator sales page, hold on here, I'll just grab the link. You can see it if you want. I literally added a banner that was like, sick of long sales pages, click here. And it pops up a video of me just being like, hey, let me talk to you about the incubator. Because I know like it's a long sales page. I will like admit it. I could probably edit it down a bit, but there's like a lot that I wanted to communicate. But some people like all those details and some people don't. Some people are like, just tell me what the freaking program is. Like, just tell me. So I was like, I'm going to add a video here. And if you go further down the page, there's also another video where I take you behind the scenes of like, here's what it looks like, and here's what you get access to, and here's how it works. And so that was one way that I was like, what would be fun? What are my people looking for? Like for you, Wendy, it could be the type of thing where like you could literally have like side-by-side videos, like parents watch this, students watch this, or like Video Ask is a super fun tool that like lets you build out little video funnels where like it'll ask a question like, are you a, parent trying to support their student who's struggling with studying, whatever, and then they click it. And then it's like a little video message from you being like, hey, I'm Wendy, check this out. Let me talk to you about this. Let me ask you, what are you struggling with most? And then it like literally lets you sequence videos and gain like info back from your people. So there's like all sorts of fun things you can do. But for everyone on the call, like when you're thinking about your sales page, I just want you to come back to like, what would be ridiculously fun? Like what would almost be like too fun to do for your sales page? Like what you'd be like, oh, I can't do that. That's ridiculous. And then I want you to do it. Like just try it. Just see how it feels. Like if you're like, okay, I don't have to write like a copywriter or like fit myself into a formula. I just get to do something that feels fun. What would you do? Would you literally build your sales page in a Google Doc? Would you only do video? Would you hide as many fish puns as possible into your launch materials? I definitely had a client do that. It was amazing. What would you do that's fun? And what would you do that's human? Like, how can you talk to the human of your person? Like, hey, this is me. This is what you get. This is why I'm so passionate in it. This is the intentionality and like the love I've poured into this program. I know that it is like the best thing for you if this is what you want. So check it out. Like that is really when things start flowing, and that's when it really just can feel like so good and just take off some of like the heaviness. I could rant for a really long time about sales pages, but I'm going to pause there because I know we've already been going for so long. But I just want to check in and see if we have any last questions, anything else I can help people with before we wrap up for the day. If you're like thinking about the incubator, thinking about any of my programs, you can also ask questions about those now or DM me on Instagram. What questions are left for anyone?
I just would like to add, I really think it's important, and I guess I don't feel always comfortable doing it. So like when you said, get outside the box on your sales page and just be yourself. I think when people see your passion, and that's why my close rate is so high on my one-to-one, is because I can ask personal questions and really, explain how I serve students. I think that that's really what people want, is someone that is authentic. And so I think we all can think about a little bit outside the box about our potential clients and how we can serve them best, is letting them see that we care.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so beautiful and so true. Just like the passion, the care, the authenticity, the integrity. I mean, that's why we're all here on this call. That's why, for those of you who've watched all the way to the end for the replay, like, I know that's why you're here, is because you don't want to be overwhelmed by content. You don't want to overwhelm your people. You just want to deliver the best experience possible. And so I think the more we just keep coming back to that as our intention, like the better things get.
Thank you for your time, Emily. You're very, very talented in your insights. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Wendy. And thank you for asking such great questions and sharing about what you're working on. And thank you everyone for coming live and asking so many great questions. This has been absolutely wonderful. The replay will be sent out probably in the next couple of days. And I also post all the replays on my blog on my site too. So if you're ever like, oh, I want to go back and like catch this, or I want to like, for you, Wendy, I want you to go back and pull content pieces out of this because you shared so many good things. I'm like, I want you to grab that for your content. But they're all going to live on my blog and be sent out. And I hope that everyone just has a great rest of your Monday. And if you have any follow-up questions, you need anything else from me, you can always hit reply back to the emails that I send, or send me a voice message on Instagram, is also allowed as well. So thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye, everyone.